One of the challenges that you always have is that food production is connected to job creation. If you want to do very good, high quality, organic, regenerative farming, you should actually have as little hands on it as possible. Mechanization, yeah. Greenhouse, yeah. Controlled systems, yeah. But here, it's a small scale, very labor intensive because labor is cheap, and that is actually where many things are going wrong at the same time. There's a very funny situation, not only in Kenya, but it's everywhere in Africa, probably everywhere in the world, that the land is owned by a 68-year-old guy who has been farming in that way for the last 30, 40 years. And he decides what is going to be grown, how it's going to be grown. Young people are coming from university and college and whatever, they are actually more switched on, they're more alert, they know how to do it better, and they have a challenge talking to Papa to tell him, like, are you sure you want to do maize again this year? If you look at the quality of the soil here in Kenya and how depleted it is and how unhealthy it is and how the farmers are suffering because of that and spending, excuse my language, shitload of money on fertilizers that even make it worse, but so it's a short-term solution for the yield, but it's a long-term damage. Everyone sees that. What I found interesting is that a lot of farmers have a kitchen garden. They spray on the farm, but they don't spray in the kitchen garden. That's what they're eating themselves. And in general, the percentage of cancer at farmers is like huge, and everybody knows that.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Organic Guy podcast. This is your home of organic conversations. I'm your host, the Organic Guy, and around here we do have conversations on how we can make our food systems really get to work for us rather than against us. Today's I want to have a conversation on I think one of the most neglected variable when it comes to farming, and that's on the issue of information, right? Most people, you can argue, have access to information. There's a lot of availability of this information, but when it comes to execution, I think that's where we got a little bit of a problem. So to help us have this conversation is someone who is very much entrenched in this space. Is the founder of Yielder, and now I think the co-CEO of Farmbetter as well. So he'll put a little bit of daylight in this conversation. He goes by the name of Alexander Valeton. Alexander, thank you very much for making time.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. When I was doing a little bit of research about you as well, I realized you're very much entrenched in the media world. You've done a lot of documentary and film. So is it fair to say agriculture and media is sort of intertwined? And like, if you were to choose, would you say media is your first love, or is it agriculture?
Nah, it's a bit more subtle. It is more that things that I am interested in, I want to repackage in such a way that other people can enjoy it as well. And for me, it doesn't really matter what kind of medium I'm using. So I can be, before I came to Kenya, I was making books and exhibitions, and then I was working as a journalist, and I set up a media company here. And now I'm very much into agriculture and actually food production, mainly because I like cooking, I like eating, and I want to respect farmers better and to create access to knowledge for farmers to be able to farm better. I think that is the thing I'm doing now.
Interesting. So how long have you been in Kenya? I mean, in terms of like your work and some of the things you've done so far?
It's already 18 years. So I came in 2008, but then I came as a media producer. At that time, I didn't have anything to do with agriculture specifically.
How would you rate your experience in Kenya so far? How have been the environment, the people?
I'm a free guy, so if I would not have liked it, I would have gone. No, I really like living here, and I think that Kenya is going through a very interesting transformation whereby it's really coming from a development state into developing state. And it's going so fast, and you see it everywhere popping up. So the quality of life is going up, but also the divide between the rich and the poor is growing. And I'm very much involved in all these developments.
You talked about having started in the media world and sort of transitioning into the agricultural world. What would you say was the thing that sort of made you move a little bit more into the agricultural world?
I was doing a lot of media productions on agriculture, and I was always struck by the fact that the knowledge on farming is available everywhere in the world, but it doesn't reach farmers or smallholder farmers. So in order to be able to help them to farm better, I thought, well, why not set up a company that actually translates that academic knowledge so that farmers can use it? And that's what the basis was for Yielder. Yeah, that's how that idea was born.
This is around what time?
About 10 years ago, 2016, 17.
Okay. yeah. It's quite interesting when you talk like 10 years ago. My mind sort of shifted in the early 2006 and 2007. And I was about to say, yeah, at that time we didn't have like a lot of online information. And even in 2017, I don't think there was a lot of like people having access to the internet.
I think the digital penetration or the use of smartphones and phones at that time was indeed, like, in agriculture sector, it was like 27%. Now it is much higher, of course.
So you could say at that time, what vision did you have? So the idea was you want to create a platform where farmers can come and sort of get to search for information, and then they can implement it in their farm. So what was your vision at that time?
The vision at that time was really to make knowledge accessible. For me, as I said before, I don't mind what kind of stage I'm using for it. It can be digital, it can be in person, it can be any way. But to create access to that knowledge was the basic idea. Technically, it was not really thought through in the right way. And in order to be able to bring it to the farmers, we had to set up that whole network of trainers and extension agents to bring it to them. And actually also the financial model wasn't in place. So later on it developed into a training platform. And then that knowledge that was available, we build it or rebuild it into digital trainings. And then we trained trainers. And that was super multimedia. And there was a lot of games and videos and all those kind of things in those trainings. Then we trained trainers, and they went to farmers and trained farmers in person. So the trainers were very digital, the farmers were not, or less. So that is how it became a successful company.
It's quite interesting. So before we go into the nitty-gritties of how we can actually, and some of the work you've done in terms of helping farmers have access to this information and sort of try to implement it, take me back to your early childhood, because I'm a huge believer like how you grow up sort of has an influence on some of the things you pursue later in life. So you say you are sort of free-spirited, you're a free person. So in your young age, so 5, 6, 7 years old, if I were to ask some of your friends that you're growing up with, how do you think would they describe you?
That is an interesting one. I grew up in a relatively wealthy but small village outside of Amsterdam. So I went to a Waldorf school, and that is already very organic. But that was 60 years ago. So that whole organic thinking and the whole, thinking about including nature in your life and respecting nature and those kind of things, that is ingrained in my childhood. But I was a very dreamy child. I like to play, I like to gaze at things happening. I didn't really like to go to school. I didn't understand the whole system of school. I didn't understand the purpose of going to school. Later on, it turned out that I'm pretty dyslexic. But that at that time, that was not known yet, and it was not accepted. But really, until I was like 14, 15 years old, I didn't do very much. I was just amazed by all the things I was seeing and trying to fit that into a bigger frame. And at that time, there was a teacher, when I was 14 or something, there was a teacher who recognized that I was dyslexic. And he started to teach me in a different way. And then suddenly, it picked up and I understood it. And then from there, I flew.
Interesting. So at this time, of course, you didn't have an idea. Maybe you'll get involved in agriculture. And then, of course, you go on to get involved in the media world. Do you get exposed in the media world, maybe watching movies and you're saying, you know what, this is something I want to do? Or how did you end up being in the media world?
I think from the beginning, I really liked to be that translator. So, getting inspired by things I was seeing and trying to inspire other people with that and repackaging it in such a way that it actually grew, that the audience grew, talking to people and explaining things. That was what I always liked and what I still like. And indeed, the kind of platform, I don't really care about that. Now, it is more about going back to the roots of the things, where it's like, what is really important? And it's not like the nice decorations and the amazement only, but it's really like, where does it all come from? It's our planet, it's our food, it is how we deal with all these things around us, and seeing in an amazed way how people are spoiling it and how it's all being destructed. It's like, we have to do something about that.
And then your first instinct was like, we have to find a better way to tell this story so that people can relate towards it, and then they can take sort of some kind of action.
Share an amazement. It's like that. It's like, whoa, isn't this special? Isn't this beautiful? What are we doing? This is weird. Have we thought twice? And so it's a kind of enthusiasm, to share that. I don't like the media that says like, oh, you shouldn't do this, oh, you shouldn't do that, and correcting people. But it's like inviting them for the solution is much nicer to do than criticizing people.
Yeah, absolutely. Just giving them an option of saying, hey, actually, you can do this, in terms of sort of trying to pull them into what you're trying to do, rather than pushing them and trying to say, hey, what you're doing is wrong. This is the best path for you to follow. And I think that sort of attracts people more, and then, it makes them a little bit more curious. They're like, oh, okay, this is something I can get myself interested as well.
I think that it's much nicer to be invited for something nice than to be sent away from something bad.
Yeah. Interesting. So, you've grown in this area, sort of you've been exposed into this organic environment. You get yourself into the media world. I mean, there's so many places you could go, and then you sort of decide to come to Kenya, or how do you end up in Kenya?
Before moving to Kenya, I was living in Asia for a long time. So I was for 15 years in Asia. And then I went back to Netherlands, and I set up a media production company there. And then I was invited to run a media production company here. So there was a guy who was making a TV program in Tanzania that was very successful, and he asked me to bring it to TV here in Kenya and Uganda. So that's how I got here.
And then I'm wondering, from an agriculture perspective, there are so many variables. I mean, we talk about finance, we talk about access to land, we talk about technology. So these are some of the factors that a lot of people tend to concentrate into. But your first instinct was, I think people need more information. What was your thinking behind that?
Actually, when I was making these media productions, I saw that especially smallholder farmers, they are struggling. And of course, it is a very holistic thing. So if you want to create better food, you have to create more money for the farmer. So the farmer can make better choices. But what kind of choices would he make or she make? That's about inputs, that's about soil management, it's about access to markets, it's about everything that he or she is struggling with should be solved in a way, and the only way to solve it is to create access to information. If you don't know what your choices are, how can you make the right choice? Or if you don't know what your options are. Well, so showing these options and showing the way how to get those things, that is actually the what we are doing. And training is a huge element there. Still access to money, access to peers who are going through the same struggle. And all these kind of tools we are bringing together now in Farmbetter. But it has to be holistic. You cannot just say, here's a bag of fertilizer and good luck. I'll see you again. You have to tell farmers how to use it, what to do with it, that there is an organic option, that there is other ways to do it. We had the challenge with the biochar recently. There's biochar in the market. It's a very good product, but you have to gradually go from chemical fertilizer to biochar. You cannot do it overnight. Farmers don't understand that. They say like, this is better and cheaper, so let's use it. But you have to take them by the hand and tell them, it takes like 3 or 4 years, and then you're fully on biochar. Now, those transitions, it's super difficult for a farmer to understand that. Actually, for everyone to understand it, not specifically for a farmer. And farmers are cornered in a way because they don't have access to money, they don't have access to bigger land, they don't have access to information, they don't have access to many things that they can have access to. But at this moment, there are so many sources of information. which to trust. How can a farmer know which one is relevant for him or her? That is, I think, one of the big challenges at this moment.
And then that begs the question, how do you approach them and actually try to sell them this solution of, hey, we have this platform that we think that can be very useful for you. It has a lot of information. And as you said, in most cases, they want to adopt things that will help make them money, right? So in the end, like, how do you go into the farmer and convince them and tell them, hey, maybe using our platform to get information will be sort of help for you in the long run?
One of the probably most important things is the element of trust. So how can a farmer trust the information he is getting? So we are solving it by setting up a pretty extensive network of extension agents. So we're not there yet, to connect every farmer to an extension agent, and each extension agent shouldn't have more than 400 farmers to service. That means if there's 4 million farmers in Kenya, we need about 10,000 of those agents. We're not there yet. And of course, there's a challenge for us to create enough money to pay these guys, because it has to be a paid job. And we want people to remain in the communities. Otherwise, that trust is, not in place. We are specifically focusing on young people as extension agents because they are digital savvy. They know how to operate the phone. They are more critical. We prefer to work with women because they're more precise. And so we have a kind of outline of what this extension agent should look like, and we try to recruit them. That is a very trusted way to inform these farmers and to build a relationship with them. And also, there are many questions. So we have this very nice chatbot, AI-based chatbot, so farmers can talk through the chatbot about everything. If that doesn't work, then it can always be elevated to the extension agent. And that is probably the best way to do it. But definitely the in-person last mile is essential.
So then that brings a little bit of double. I mean, because in one hand you're saying, yes, farmers need someone who they can trust, and then they can be able to actually take this information and use it in their farms. But on the other hand, you're also offering a solution that is AI-based. And the back end, you have to trust that the farmer actually knows how to use. Then I'm thinking in the long run, then it seems like the extension agents, their job will be in a little bit of jeopardy.
I don't think so. Unlike many other digital platforms, we really believe in that human face last mile, and that's trust. One of the challenges with the whole AI thing is the hallucination. So if an AI system doesn't know the answer, it will come up with an answer. In the AI we build, we really try to take that out, and if it doesn't know the answer, it says talk to the extension agent. And the extension agent then can talk to us or to any other source if the agent doesn't know it. And of course, you can create very, very complicated and difficult questions that nobody knows the answer of. And of course, we've been trying it with the chatbot to go to the fringes and to see where it doesn't work anymore. And indeed, it elevates to agent then. Going back to that thing, it's really important to have that combination between people and digital. Digital alone doesn't work. People alone don't work. So the combination works very well.
So you're saying in terms of like people alone is not scalable enough in terms of the resources that you need to actually get to every farmer?
It's scalable and people are expensive. So I would prefer to do it 100% digital, but that doesn't work because that trust factor, a farmer is not going to trust his phone only. You need a second source of information. When I just came here and I was working in media, people told me it's like Kenyans always need 4 sources of information. First is a story that he hears from someone else. Then you have to hear it on the radio. Then you read it in a newspaper. And then you can check it somewhere else. And only then it is trusted. And that's the same for farmers. So they need to know it from an extension agent. They have to be cross-checking with their colleagues, talk about it with their wife, and then get a digital support. And then it kind of sticks on and it can work. But if I tell you chemical fertilizer, skip it and make compost, it's like, I've been using it for 30 years. Why would I? What is wrong with my chemicals? And then slowly, you can change your mind, your opinion about it.
How are farmers using this chatbots? What kind of questions are they asking? Are they like, hey, my goat is sick, I need some medicine, or like, what fertilizer should I use? What kind of questions are they asking?
Anything. Okay, if you register, the first question is, where are you? Are you on your farm? And then we know the GPS data. Then your name, your phone number, those kind of things. Then there's a question about the size of your land and what you're doing. Are you doing crops or animals? And what kind of crops, what kind of animals? So there's a kind of a profile. Now, in the first place, we can send weather and pest alerts based on your location, and we can regionalize the questions. So if you're a mango farmer on the slopes of Mount Kenya, or you're a mango farmer in Kwale, it's quite different because the soil is different, temperature is different, probably the size of your land is different. If you have 5 trees in Embu or 200 trees in Kwale, your farming methodology is different. The diseases are different, the market is different. So if you ask questions like, hey, I see white things on the leaves of my mango, what do I do? Then based on your location, you get a different advice, and based on the weather patterns, etc. And it can say like, oh, make a picture of your leaves, and then the picture will be analyzed, also based on your geolocation. In that way it works. And then, of course, the answer you're getting from the chatbot is 99.9% organic, and the last 0.1% is because in some cases it is better to use chemicals, and especially if it's super aggressive diseases or things like that. So we are not more Catholic than the Pope. We have to respect the farmer's market position. So if there's a full armyworm, there's no real organic way to treat it. There's organic ways to prevent it, but not to treat it. Yeah, then we will tell him to spray.
So that's quite interesting. So I'm thinking for like a normal farmer who is kind of tech savvy, as in they can have access to the internet, they can go on Google and try to, find the kind of information. For example, an armyworm, hey, there's an armyworm in my farm, what should I do? And also there's your platform where they can also go there. So if they are faced in that kind of situation, why should they go to your app to try and find this information rather than going to like a regular Google search?
We are better. That's the main reason. So in the first place, we have a dashboard for the agribusiness. And that can be a cooperative, can be an NGO, can be an input provider or off-taker or whatever. Then next to that is a app for extension agent and the chatbot for the farmer. And these three are interconnected. So the extension agent can see what the farmer is talking about. And the farmer can ask a direct question. If the farmer is going on about the full armyworm, then the extension agent can jump in and say, like, do you think it's there or is it there? If it's there, then we have to make an alert for the farmers around you. And this is what you can do, because then it's super serious. Then you really have to take action. Now, those kind of interconnected things, that really works. So, for example, we're doing quite a lot in dairy now. You can see the production of the farmer going up. And the extension agent can give support about fodder production or all those kind of things. If that stagnates, the growth of the production per cow or per farm, then the extension agent can jump in and offer help. The dashboard, so the off-taker or the cooperative, can see how active the extension agent is, if he's really doing what he's supposed to be doing. And of course, the business is thriving if the farmer is producing more. So there's more money in that value chain, and the cooperative likes that and pays us. But because that's going to be your next question, what is your money model? So that whole value chain or ecosystem is getting better. But we really do it from the perspective of the farmer. So the farmer has to thrive, and then the value chain can be more healthy.
So in your case, your platform is more specialized in the agriculture, and it's more likely to give relevant and accurate information than what a regular farmer can get from Google.
Definitely. So we connected to, for example, the dairy production. We connected to quality-based milk pricing, because that's what cooperatives want. So at the farm, when the intake of the milk is taking place, The milk is being measured for fat percentage, aflatoxin levels, if there's no water being added, and all those kind of things. And based on that, the farmer will get money and support. Or he will be told, sorry, I can't take it. We're not going to pay you because it's too dirty, or too this, or too that. And that is going through the app and through the chatbot and the database, the dashboard. So it's all connected. So the farmer actually gets more support and gets more money. And if it's just Google, then it's only one little element and not the whole infrastructure that comes with it.
Okay, I think that makes sense. That reminds me, I think there was a time we were talking about, is it the Internet of Things? Mm-hmm. So people have access to a lot of data, whether it's your fridge or your car, like it's picking a lot of information. And then in the end, it will be able to guide you or tell you, oh, hey, before you go home, your fridge doesn't have milk, maybe you should buy some. So that's what I'm trying to see here. So you have created a system where it's sort of interconnected and it can be able to point out to maybe it's a farmer or like an extension agent. They can see things before they actually happen in real time. And then I was wondering from a data perspective, because there's people always say, data is gold nowadays. From your end, what kind of data do you want, and does the kind of data you're collecting really helping you give better solutions to farmers?
I think the whole data conversation is super important, super confusing. And I don't know many people who made money by selling data. I know, of course, quite some people who built their business on analyzing data for themselves. So there's a lot of people who say, like, oh, you have so much data, you must be very rich. Yeah, it's the backbone of our business to have data to be able to give good advice. But selling data is not really happening. On the other hand, I'm personally very much involved in the whole, it's almost like a philosophy of data. How are you going to respect the data? How is it possible that we have data and the farmer doesn't know what we have and how we deal with it? And farmers are, for a good reason, quite scared to give us data because they're always afraid that we share it with KRA or the government in general. And they don't realize how much data Safaricom has. So it is a tricky field. And indeed, it is very important to deal with it in the best way and the most honest way. So we always say that the data that we have are owned by the farmer. We have to ask them to use that data. And it's our responsibility to collect clean data. There's a lot of dirty data around. Whenever we want to share data with others, we have to ask permission to the farmer. And for example, we do credit scoring, whereby financial data, we get it from the farmer, we get it from the cooperative, and we can make a profile of the farmer and give that to a money lender or a bank. But of course, we have to give it unanonymized, so it can be traced back to that individual farmer, which is super scary. But that is essential, otherwise the farmer will never get that loan, because the loan is in his name or her name. Now, that is a very clear case where we have to be super careful in how to handle data. We have to do it responsibly and for the benefit of the farmer or the cooperative. So that is, we have policies around that. But you were asking about what we collect and what we do with it. So the main reason why we collect data is to give better advice to the farmer. And how we can do that is by, I always see it just as a simple spreadsheet. So there's a name of a farmer, a phone number, a location, the size of the land, and those kind of things. And if it's really needed, then we can add columns to it. But of course, we have to collect it from the farmer. And sometimes the farmer can do it himself or herself. Sometimes we need our extension agent to collect those data. And if there's an extension agent involved, then it becomes expensive.
Yeah, I can imagine. Because, the amount of extension agents you need to collect all the farmers' information.
And of course, you have to repeat it quite often because then you can see the change. So if we see the growing production and it's every year it's going to be 10% more, then we are successful. Well, the farmer is successful, and so we are.
So in Kenya, is there like policies and laws that help you in terms of what you need to do to protect the farmers' data?
Yeah, the data commission here in Kenya is pretty good and very strong. And that there's of course, international regulations that Kenya complies to. It is in place. There's one funny thing that the Kenyan government now says that all the data collected in Kenya are owned by the Kenyan government. And there's a lot of people who don't want that. And that's why we have these consent contracts with farmers saying that we never share data unless they give permission. And actually the question is if that contract is stronger than the Kenyan law that says that all the data collected are supposed to be shared with the government. And that is actually what we are talking about with the Data Commission now. And it seems that our contract with the farmer is stronger. So we don't need to share those data with the government unless it's anonymized.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one makes sense. You mentioned that farmers own the data. So how is that possible?
We are actually only taking care of the data. So they are responsible. They are responsible for the data and the cleanness of the data that they give us. And we can support them, we can help them, and we can collect it with an extension agent, but they are responsible for what they share with us. It's almost like, if we're talking about KRA, you're responsible for what information you're issuing. If that is wrong, then it's your fault. It's not their fault. And I think that ownership of data is quite important, and that farmers should know that.
Yeah, for sure. And I was thinking, does a normal regular farmer know anything about data? When you go to them and you're like, hey, just fill in this form, do they have the knowledge of how important is the data, or is it just filling in for the sake of it?
I think the term data is confusing, but if you ask a farmer how big is your land and he says 5 acres, then that is data. But knowing that it is 5 acres, that is just normal for him or her. And how many chicken do you have, and how many cows do you have? And so what are you doing is normal knowledge. If you call it data, then it becomes very abstract. And that is probably not as tangible as 20 cows.
So what I'm getting from you is you don't subscribe to the fact that data is the new gold. It's just if you have the data and then you can use it to give better advice, that's just it.
No, data is super essential. And if we want to if the farmers need to have advice, they have to share data. And based on those data, you can give a clean advice. But even the soil quality is data. And the weather is data. Everything is data. So how can you advise a farmer about what to grow and how to grow it if you don't know what the quality of the soil is and what the weather predictions are, and even what the historic weather is and how it is changing? Because that, of course, that climate change and those kind of things, that is super essential information for a farmer on what to do in 3, 4, 5 years and how to grow it. Now you see the whole coffee production coming up is because of climate change. It used to be tea only. Now where tea was grown, you can grow coffee now. And many people are thriving because the coffee prices are very good.
Yeah. And then, so I'm wondering, from your experience, since you've been working with farmers, you've worked with extension officers for quite a while now, are there stories that you've seen, like from farmers, can be from extension agents who have used your platform and you're like, you know what, I think we've made an impact? Or are there like really stories that have moved you in the process?
For me, the real eye-opener was like 5-6 years ago. I was in Muranga and I was doing, was filming with people who had been trained on organic farming. And it hadn't rained, it was in September and it hadn't rained for 7-8 months. So all these patches, all these, the hills were all yellow. And everybody was complaining it was too dry and it was too this. But every now and then you saw these green patches in between, and that were organic farmers. Because their soil was much healthier and it contained all the moist that was there. And these farmers were actually more clever farmers, because they already had pumped up water and they kept on irrigating the farms, and they were not waiting for things to happen and then took action. They were prepared, and they knew that it could go wrong and that the rain could last a few more months. And I really found that's fantastic. And what I really liked is that a lot of farmers whose land was very dry came to look at the organic farms and said, like, this is interesting, this works. And how can this be green now? So there was evidence of success, and I really like that.
So this can be attributed to the fact that they had access to better information, or like they can be able to implement the kind of information that was available to them.
Definitely, yeah. Well, I think every farmer now sees climate change. We don't need to rub that in anymore because the climate is doing that itself. And so they're more alert. They know they have to do something about that. And they start shopping around. It's like, what are the solutions? And of course, the whole organic way of farming is an available solution, and it's not stigmatized as old-fashioned or whatever anymore. It is actually better soil. Is very clear that it gives a better yield. So, yeah, I think the stigma on organic farming is gone. There is still, of course, hurdles. It is harder. There's probably a little bit more risk. And converting from non-organic to organic farming you still have the yield gap for 2 or 3 years.
Then that begs the question, because of late we've been seeing a lot of conversation around regenerative agriculture, a lot of advocacy on agroecology, on organic farming. Why do you think that is the case? Why have we seen a lot of drive for farmers to adopt these kind of systems? And is it the right thing for you? I mean, from where I stand.
If you look at the quality of the soil here in Kenya and how depleted it is and how unhealthy it is and how the farmers are suffering because of that and spending excuse my language, shitload of money on fertilizers that even make it worse. So it's a short-term solution for the yield, but it's a long-term damage. Everyone sees that. And I think the growing respect for the planet, or the awareness that we are all responsible for making this planet healthy, is something that everyone knows and everybody respects. What I found interesting is that a lot of farmers have a kitchen garden. They spray on the farm, but they don't spray in the kitchen garden. That's what they're eating themselves. And in general, the percentage of cancer at farmers is like huge, and everybody knows that. And yeah, the awareness and the sensitization of the impact of non-organic farming, it is pretty clear. We only have to convince the off-takers, the shops, the supermarkets, the markets, the mama bogas, and the end consumers that they have to be aware of that as well.
I mean, that was my next question in terms of, yes, a lot of farmers are aware now of the kind of effect, like the chemicals they're using in their farms and the synthetic fertilizers they're using in their farms and what it's doing to their soils. So we do have a contingent of farmers who have already converted or were organic, and to some large extent, they are struggling to have access to the markets. From your end, what do you think needs to be done for these farmers to have better access to these markets?
In Europe and America, in those places, farmers are getting a better pay for organic produce. Also because the risk is higher and all these things. In Kenya, that is not going to happen because the certification of organic still is a challenge. It's expensive, and the main reason why it's expensive is in the end product you cannot see it. So you have to certify the process of farming and not only the end product. And of course, there's some solutions because there's farmers controlling each other or supervising each other on how to do it, and that works. But it's not really trusted by the end consumer. What is super interesting is that I recently heard that there is a thing in the market. It's a kind of gun, and with that gun, you can from the outside scan the nutritious value of a tomato, apple, or whatever. That means that you see on a little screen that it contains so much X and so much I and whatever. Now imagine what the impact will be, because then you're going to buy your fruits and vegetables based on the nutritious value and not on the kilos. And that would mean that, well, we all know that an organic tomato has 3 or 4 times more qualities than a non-organic tomato. And the same counts for any fruit, any vegetable. And if you can see it with that scanner, and that scanner would cost probably $20, $30. So you're walking around in the market, scanning what you're buying. Imagine the impact that can have on the global food production. And things like that will eventually come here in Africa as well. And of course, Kenya is always the front runner in Africa. So if it's coming to Africa, it will come to Kenya first. And you see it actually in the dairy industries. Everybody knows that your baby wants to have very clean and healthy milk. And you see that companies that are working on that higher quality for a higher price are actually thriving. And everybody knows that some producers are not as clean as they could be. And their production, they're struggling. And they're not really struggling, but they're now advertising with, we are clean.
Yeah, because now people have access to a lot more information on what they're eating.
And they have access to choice. So they can choose between expensive but good or cheap and bad.
Yeah. So you think there's an awakening between consumers? They are like, hey, I need to be more aware of what I'm eating. And as a result, they'll be able to demand more farmers to go organic and then to have these products in their shelves.
I think so, and I definitely hope so. But of course, the big chunk of the consumers don't have that choice because they don't have the money to pay for something more expensive. They just have to worry about a full tummy, and they don't have that choice. But it will come. And there's always front runners, and there's always people who have more money, and they will create that market, and they will create that choice, and it trickles down in that way.
It's sort of the old story of when cars first came out. It was the rich guys who could only afford cars, and then a lot more people came in, and then it became more available nowadays, right? A lot more people can afford cars today than they could when they first came out. So I think it's that similar concept that they are going to be early adopters of organic. People are willing to pay for it, and in the long term you have a lot more people growing the food, and then it becomes a little bit cheaper for everyone to also have access to it.
Definitely. Look at the mobile phones. First it was the early adapters who had a big mobile phone, and now everybody has a smartphone, or a lot of people have a smartphone, and they also see the value of it, because if you don't have a smartphone, you're missing out. And when I came here in Kenya, one of the things I found very interesting is that people prefer to spend money on bundles than on matatus. So even because you had to be connected to find work. You rather walk 4 or 5 kilometers than not be online or not be accessible.
Yeah, that's a really, really good observation as well. Yeah. And it is true. So I think from that end, then a lot of work needs to be done from the consumers themselves and also from the growers themselves, as in they have to, I guess, keep doing it. And for them to keep doing it, they have to see some kind of demand from the consumers. I'm saying, hey, actually, we need your products. We're willing to pay for your products. Can you continue doing what you do, right? And then that will sort of have a trickle effect for more farmers to come in and continue growing.
And based on that, I think what we need to do, we as service providers all together, we have to de-risk farmers. And then, so it should be easier for a farmer to make the right choice or to change. So that is probably where we have to help. And then the other thing that we should address one way or another is all the post-harvest losses. I mean, it's 1/3 of the production is being thrown away. 1/3 of everything that is growing in a field is thrown away. That's bizarre. And I just don't understand it.
I think in the African context, we see it's more of a logistical issue, because you can go into Kiambu, for example, they've grown a lot of cabbages or a lot of tomatoes, but a few kilometers away in the northeastern or in Turkana, they can't have access to those products because of the logistical issues.
It is partly logistical, but it's also a mindset. I was in Busia, and they were harvesting carrots, and it's, excuse my language, ridiculous. There's a field of carrots. There's all these women bent over pulling all these carrots out. In the first place, only the straight carrots were collected. Everything that was bent or like forked or whatever, they just left it on the land. These donkeys on the land, they had this orange glow over them because they were only eating carrots. So that is already post-harvest loss, because people don't want to buy funny shaped carrots. That's already probably 1/3 that is left on the land. Then the other carrots, they are being thrown into a cart, being driven to the river, washed in the river. They were washed in a very uncareful way, so they were all breaking, and and then they were put in piles again. Then a broker would come and say, like, I want that pile or that pile. But the broker couldn't absorb the whole production. So part of it was rotting in the field there, although it was perfectly fine, clean, washed carrots. It is more than logistics. It's also a mindset. It's also the whole contract farming that actually doesn't work. If that would work, then these farmers would have sold their produce half a year ago or earlier. It is also that all the farmers at one time produce all the carrots of the whole country. So the price is plummeting. And it's more than logistics. It's a mindset, it's organization, and it is uncreative farming. I was walking around there. It's like, well, why don't we make carrot soup? All those broken carrots you can make into soup, and you can freeze it, and you can export it to Dubai. But that system is not in place.
I guess it's the habit of actually doing what everybody's doing. So I guess when you are in that environment, you can sort of, raise your head up and try and see what else is being done. So you just keep on repeating what everybody's doing.
But that is exactly what I mean with the de-risking, because it is a risk to change. And if you think about it, then people should diversify and work in a different way. And it should not be 5 acres of carrots only year in, year out. There should be crop rotation and intercropping and all those kind of things that come with regenerative farming. But how to de-risk the farmer to make that change? Because there's going to be a yield gap. It takes 3 or 4 years before your cashew plant is going to harvest. So that system should be supporting farmers to change. And it's not just a market. And we are ending in a very neoliberal, post-colonial, whatever system here, whereby the market is only deciding what is happening. And that market is always asking for now and cash, and as little cash as possible, because the rest of the value chain has to thrive. So the farmer has to suffer.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's always the case. So then that begs the question. I mean, I would love to hear your ideas as well, because we've been talking about access to information, and I mean, we have an abundance of information. There is a lot of it. But when it comes to actualizing and then farmers actually putting it into work, you find there's that gap between the availability of information and actually farmers putting it into work. We're just giving the example of carrots there. So what is your idea then of helping more farmers actually put the things they're seeing or the things they're learning to work?
There's a very funny situation, not only in Kenya, but it's everywhere in Africa, probably everywhere in the world, that the land is owned by a 68-year-old guy who has been farming in that way for the last 30, 40 years. And he decides what is going to be grown, how it's going to be grown. Young people are coming from university and college and whatever. They are actually more switched on. They're more alert. They know how to do it better. And they have a challenge talking to Papa to tell him, like, are you sure you want to do maize again this year? Or sugar or whatever. So that's all crops that are giving an income, relatively low risk, and there's a tradition there. So the challenge is, how can we support these young guys, and there's also girls, to take over the land of the fathers? What kind of system can you create so that Baba doesn't feel the risk of leaving the land, still gets the money, still has the pride of being a farmer, still can talk to his friends, like, oh, I'm a farmer, I've got 5 acres. And while the young guys are actually applying their modern digital knowledge to that modern farming methodologies, they can change. And there's this economic part in it, there's a status part in it, there's a traditional part in it. There's all different elements that come together, but it's stagnating growth and stagnating change. And if you are that 65-year-old farmer and you have been buying that fertilizer, chemical fertilizer from your cousin for the last 30 years, and now somebody comes and says, that was a mistake, you don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that you've been wasting your money and that you've been trusting your cousin and he doesn't know either. So how to make that change acceptable? And I think that has to go through young people.
Yeah, so you think there has to be sort of a generational transition?
Because that young guy, in 20 years, he will be an old guy. And then again, there has to be a younger generation with modern technique and modern ways of thinking. Imagine the average age of a farmer here is of a landowner is 68. The average age of a coffee tree is 42. As if in the last 42 years there's not been any innovations in coffee growing. So if you uproot it and you plant a new one, then the production is tripling. So all those kind of things, it's quite easy to reasonably think about it, but you have to think about it in an emotional way and a psychological way, and not only economical.
Yes, and that requires us to have hard conversations on what is the best way, and also trying to convince, as you said, people that yes, this is the right path for you to take as well. I was wondering, in terms of the people you are serving, so I'm assuming they're probably small-scale farmers in most cases, and I think in terms of definition, is it somebody who has like less than 1 acre or something like that? We have always had debate in terms of what is the right path to take. Do we need to have like large-scale irrigation system, the Galana-Lanus, for us to actually have more information, more food for us to feed our people? What is your take, having worked with small-scale farmers and involved in the agricultural sector? Do we still need to continue relying on small-scale farmers, or do we need, to have this kind of bigger project to help produce more food?
I like this question a lot because I'm quite radical about that. One of the challenges that you always have is that food production is connected to job creation. If you want to do very good, high-quality, organic, regenerative farming, you should actually have as little hands on it as possible. Mechanization, yeah. Greenhouse, yeah. Controlled systems, yeah. But here it's a small scale, very labor intensive because labor is cheap, and that is actually where many things are going wrong at the same time. Because you have to inform that guy who is working only for 3 days a year on your farm, only helping for harvesting, to be connected with what he's producing. How can that guy be? Because he's getting, 350 bob for a day? And then you ask him to be connected? That's not going to work. He just wants his 350 bob and he wants to go back home and probably do another side gig because he needs more money than that. So creating better food should not be connected with job creation. And that actually means that a lot of small-scale farmers that are actually hobby farmers, they are not thinking about business. They just think about their activity. They don't want to sit at home and do nothing. They like to be on a farm. There's a factor of pride in there as well. But it is not creating food for the people. It's creating food for his family, and there's no business model behind it. The population in Kenya is going to double in the coming 20 years. Kenya is a net food importer now and wants to be a net food exporter. That means that the production has to triple. There is a 700% yield gap. Means on every square meter, you could produce 7 times more than what is being produced now. If you intensify farming, if you do a real scientific farming, if you really do good soil testing, if you're ready to change from maize to something that is more productive but more labor intensive or more risky, that whole process, well, in the first place, is not going to come from these old guys, and you can better do it in a mechanized way, whereby you do mechanized weeding, and still you can do it in a regenerative and an organic way. So zero tillage is very good. So you respect the soil, but you know what you can do with your soil. And if you do intercropping, then suddenly the production is going to go up. And there, labor is needed, because then if you do intercropping, it's harder to do a mechanized harvesting. So then, of course, people are needed again there. And if you make your pigs walk in the field, then suddenly you have a very nice field after a few months. And that intensive grazing, for example, and we all know how productive it is, but it's a bit more labor intensive because this cattle has to move. So, yeah, I think the combination between creating jobs and food production is weird, and especially I think in the end the smallholder who is on less than 2 acres doesn't really have a real future. So if 6 or 7 smallholders can work together and jointly work on 10 acres, that would be way more productive. But then actually you have too many people, so slowly people have to phase out. But then what are these people going to do? That's going to be the next challenge again.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an interesting take, but also there's the question of, our farmers are getting a little bit too old now. We need to attract more young people into the agricultural sector as well.
I think farmers should retire when they're 50, but there's no money for that. No, but working together, and that's actually the whole idea of cooperatives as well. But then you can more easily, if you want to use a tractor and you have 2 acres, then you have a problem because it doesn't really work. You have to hire one and it's only 3 hours work. But if you have 10 acres together or 50 acres together, then you can hire a tractor for 4 days and plow the land if you want to plow. So it's more efficient to do it in that way.
Yes, for sure. But I think one of the problems we face as well is we have a lot of cultural attachment to the land. So it's very hard to get maybe 10 farmers to tell them, hey, you need to come together, put your land together so that you can be able to grow similar crops, right? Because every farmer is like, this is where I buried my dad, or this is my mother is buried. So there's no way they're gonna let themselves into such an arrangement. But I do agree with you in terms of cooperatives. I think that is one of the most underrated things that farmers aren't using enough in terms of bringing their production together and then having that bargaining power to actually take it to the market.
But you know the history of the cooperatives. It was tricky as well. So under Moy, it was really supported, and that management of many cooperatives was not chosen by quality. Let's put it that way. And now it is transforming, and also because people are getting more vocal, and suddenly, due to the digitization, all the board meetings are accessible, and it becomes more transparent. But the size of some of those cooperatives it's almost impossible to manage a cooperative with 300,000 farmers. It's so big. And what kind of management do you need? You need very, very strong CEOs and managers who really can make very good market-based decisions. And many of those managers are not very good, so they like to keep the farmers uninformed, so they are not going to be criticized about how bad they are managing. But there is a change coming. So we are dealing with a few cooperatives, and some of them are really spot on, very good, well organized. They make clear decisions, and they have a good communication towards their farmers, and they need the consent for every choice that the farmers have a buy-in to do it, and it works. Sorry, I'm going to tell a nice anecdote. We were working with a potato cooperative. There was one guy, he was managing it on his own, and he made it complete transparent. So what he said is like, he had WhatsApp groups. He said, tomorrow I'm going to buy seedlings, or how do you call it in potatoes? Tubers, or yeah. We've got 5 options, 1, 2, 3, 4. Which one do we want? And then people were openly responding. And then he said like, okay, the majority wants this type and that type. So I'm going to buy so many kgs of this and so many kgs of that. If we buy it together, we get a 10% discount. And I want 10% of that discount because I'm organizing it. And even his fee was completely transparent. Then after 3 or 4 months, he said like, okay, now it's harvesting time. I'm going to the market and sell it. How many kilos do you have? How many? And then he was selling it, and he was publishing everything, all the invoices openly. And it was very clear that he was taking 10% of the profits. I really like that.
That helps a lot and brings a lot of confidence to the members as well. They're like, yeah, it's very clear what we need to do from the start. There's no shortchanging. So yeah. I mean, a lot of transparency helps a lot in bringing confidence to the members and making them understand that we are actually on the same path as well. I mentioned you started Yielder, and now you are the co-CEO, I guess, of Farmbetter. So how did you end up, you guys coming together? What happened there?
We were working together. And I knew the other CEOs from other projects, and then we liked each other. And actually, we were talking about working together more and more. And then you get the whole thing about data sharing. And it turned out that it was easier to merge companies than remaining in silos. And actually, I think more digital service providers should work together under an umbrella and share data, because farmers are getting annoyed by yet another registration and yet another data sharing thing and whatever. At this moment, there's 460 different apps for farmers. How can they know which one is good for them? They can't. There's a lot of money being wasted in making databases, and especially on NGO level. So every NGO says, like, hey, we're going to do a 3-year project on the improvement of whatever. And the first thing we do is we make a database of farmers. And then they go out again in the field and they register 10,000 farmers. And these 10,000 farmers get the promise that their life is going to be better. They're going to be supported. Then after the 3-year project, everything is dropped again. That database is going in a drawer. And there's another NGO coming to the farmers like, yeah, oh, I hear you do poultry. Very interesting. Are you interested in a project? And they have to register again, and it's again a promise and whatever. So if you would get that list of these 10,000 farmers from that NGO, and if we could have it, it's very nice for us, because it's quite expensive for us to onboard them again, find them again, etc. So get it all together, make it one big heap of information that everybody can use. And that is the reason why I really want to get strategic partnership with other service providers, so we can offer a whole package to all the farmers and keep them in the package, not make it a 3-year project, but make it a continuous service for all these farmers. And then the cost will go down and the quality will go up.
Yeah, and then I'm guessing when you have access to such huge amount of data, then it's easier for you to make a connection or to connect the dots.
It should be. If I would have a list of all the farmers who already have a good irrigation system and the farmers who don't have a good irrigation system, then we know how to provide services. If I would have a list of all the trainings farmers have had, then yeah, we can build on that.
So it's fair to say you guys are doing well in terms of like helping farmers, and it's something I see a lot as well, especially for startups that want to work with farmers. We're in the agri-tech space, let's just say that. Most of the time, you see them raising a lot of money, and then in terms of the solutions they're offering to the farmers, they don't always, let's say, make it till the end. So there's a lot of failures in the process. So from your perspective, what do you think you're doing right in terms of making a lot more farmers trust you and want to use your products that other agri-tech don't get to do?
I think it comes back to that point of what I said before, is digital plus a human face. That combination is the best solution. It's expensive, but it works. If you want to transition farmers, you have to have farmers who want to transition. It doesn't make sense to invite that 68-year-old farmer and you know that nothing is going to happen. So we have to create access to farming for the younger generation that want to grow. So if we would have the ability to select farmers that have access to more land, have access to knowledge, have the ability to change, have access to money probably, or create access to money, then that whole system will thrive.
So being farmer-centric and trying to offer solutions that farmers actually want or farmers actually need, always helps. But I guess that one is a little bit harder. It's easier said than actually done.
It's almost like the irrigation system, yeah? It's much easier to fill a bucket and throw it in the land than to make the drip irrigation and do it very precise. But you know that you're wasting a lot of water if you just throw a bucket.
Yes. So as we finish, I want you to help us paint a picture, let's say 10, 20 years from now. We've done a lot of things right? We've given farmers a lot of information. They have access to capital, finance. How does the food system look like?
I think you have to go back historically. The chemicals, they are here in Kenya only for the last 30 years. Before that, everybody was by nature doing organic farming. I think that kind of knowledge and that kind of heritage should be reused, including all the indigenous vegetables and crops, because there was so much nutrition in there that if we would eat more amaranth and if we would eat more tree tomatoes and those kind of things, that would be so healthy. And that would make the whole ecosystem more healthy as well. That is one thing. The other thing is that there is a lot of knowledge out there in the world that we can implement here. And it sounds contradicting with going back to the traditional way of farming, but it doesn't, because they can balance out. They can help each other. Then Of course, there's this whole climate change thing, and we should adapt, and we should already be prepared for the adaptation now in order to be able to be ready in 5 years or in 10 years. Then I think due to the whole digitalization, everything will become more transparent. So the production is more linked to the market and the offtake, which will reduce the post-harvest losses as well, but also give the farmer better insight in what he can produce and what he can sell. And that is not only the low quality maize and sugar or whatever, but it's also the higher quality herbs and mushrooms and poultry. And, well, I think that will create a very good second income for farmers, or third income. Then the whole development into organic and regenerative, it has shown that it's economically viable, it is doable, it's more healthy. So that will pick up as well. I think the whole trend of monocropping in maize and sugar and those kind of things, that will slowly change. And of course, within Africa, there should be an internal market. And that will also make it possible to use less fertilizers and less chemicals, because it can be grown somewhere else in another soil and in a better place.
Yeah, it's a hard challenge given, I guess a lot more countries are being more nationalistic than wanting to open up their country to other people. We're seeing this similar case in South Africa, I guess, where they're like, enough of you guys, we need to stay here by ourselves. So yes, it would be a good thing if the market opens up, but I think the trend shows that a lot more countries are going to be more nationalistic in terms of their ideas and trying to protect their own people as well.
But it's shooting in your own foot. I mean, if you're importing sugar from Brazil, it is cheaper than growing it here because of all the fertilizer and all the situation there. And it's the same for maize. But Kenya one time decided to be not dependent on import of maize. But maybe the soil is not perfect for that. If the soil is better for strawberries, then grow strawberries for Africa or for the world.
So I'm guessing you're very optimistic about Africa moving forward.
Oh, well, definitely. No, yeah. There are so many young, bright people, but we have to give them a chance to do it.
Yes, for sure. All right. As we finish here, I usually have something I call rapid fire questions. So the idea is very simple. I have 10 questions for you. I'll throw them to you, and then you give me quick answers to those. So are you ready?
I am.
What was the first career you dreamt of having as a kid?
Something forest.
Okay. The second one is, what is one farming myth you wish would disappear forever?
The farmers are stupid.
Okay. Third is, what's one technology every farmer should embrace?
Digital.
All right. What's one question humanity isn't asking enough about food?
Taste.
Fifth question, what is one invention you wish existed for farmers?
Lower interest rates.
All right. Sixth question, what is the biggest opportunity hidden in the African agriculture today?
I think it's ancient knowledge. So the knowledge on how to farm traditionally, what the grandmothers and grandfathers were doing, that has been trashed and has been replaced for something that is not as sustainable.
That's an interesting one. All right. Seventh, what is one belief you've completely changed your mind about?
If it's about farming, then I think it is that farming can actually be quite sexy.
Okay. All right. The eighth question, what is one uncomfortable truth about farming that nobody wants to hear?
It's hard work.
All right. Ninth question, what is one quote that resonates with you most?
I don't know whose quote it is, but there was a quote I read another day. It's like, if you don't respect nature, you don't respect yourself.
All right. It's a good one. And then the last one is, knowing what you know now, what advice could you give to your 18-year-old self?
I think be respectful and aim for fun. I think the playing also comes with experimenting, exploring, and don't be stuck to what you think is good and normal and whatever, but try things, and every time you have to fail better.
All right. Thank you very much for making time for the podcast. Really enjoyed it. I'm very sure a lot of guys gained a lot of information on, especially your takes on technology and information and what we need to do as farmers to help our farmers as well. So that's really appreciative.
I hope I have contributed to the mission, and I hope I have not been too controversial. Maybe a little bit controversial is not so bad.
Which is still fine. It's just a different opinion after all. All right. So till the next podcast, remember to be organic. Cheers.